The Putin International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg was explosively opened by the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, and Ukrainian Defense Forces. From early morning, its guests were greeted by Ukrainian drones, which successfully struck the St. Petersburg oil terminal and military ships in the port of Kronstadt. Explosions echoed over the city, and a large-scale fire broke out at the terminal. This facility is one of the key hubs for trans-shipping export oil products in the Baltic region. Near St. Petersburg, the missile ship Boyki was also on fire. Last year, it repeatedly escorted tankers of Russia's Shadow Fleet. Drones also struck a plant that manufactures components for enemy cruise missiles. The successful attack was confirmed by the president of Ukraine. All these strikes took place right under Putin's nose on the day of the opening of the International Economic Forum, where the dictator traditionally boasts about the successes of the Russian economy. Interestingly, the forum's slogan is pragmatic dialogue, the path to a stable future. The only thing stable in Russia now are explosions, regular fires at oil refineries, oil depots and terminals, through which the Kremlin earns funding for its war.
Meanwhile, Lukashenko is once again trying to look menacing.
Recently, the self-proclaimed Belarusian president started threatening Ukraine with strikes.
This is how he reacts to the warning from our Magyar Brody that Kyiv has 500 potential targets in Belarus on its radar. What could become a potential target for our birds? And will Lukashenko really dare to take direct part in the war?
Amidst the love advice
girls don't marry communists.
and attempts to warn Armenia,
Armenians need to be very careful.
Alexander Lukashenko makes statements regarding Ukraine. Multi-vector, just like he is himself. One moment he assures of his peacefulness.
There never will be, there never were, and never will be our soldiers there.
The next moment he threatens.
God forbid if a military attack is launched on Belarus from any territory. The war in Ukraine will take on a completely different character. I won't go into details.
And Lukashenko has several reasons for such belligerent bravado at once. And the first one is chercher la femme. The mood of the self-proclaimed Belarusian leader was spoiled by his rival, who visited Kyiv last week.
And just recently, the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko publicly stated that he believes it is now the right time for the presidents of both Ukraine and Belarus to finally meet in person. That turned out to be interesting. Lukashenko said it, but it was Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya who came.
And Lukashenko received such a political slap for his excessive flirting with Putin. Lukashenko has always maneuvered between Moscow and the West, and until now, he balanced quite skillfully. He did not allow himself to be drawn into an open war. But lately, everything has changed, especially after the joint nuclear military exercises with Russia.
All those exercises? All these exercises, the issue of deploying the Oreshnik and nuclear weapons. Escalation can happen in different ways. Infrastructure can be used, the territory of the country can be used. We have information that certain infrastructure is being created on the territory of Belarus that should not be there.
In Kyiv, they have begun to seriously consider the threat from Belarus. Russia may use its territory for drone strikes on key Ukrainian logistics routes, particularly on supply routes from Poland.
There may be various types of specific demonstrative military actions. For example, low-altitude helicopter flyovers and aerial maneuvers near the state border, or the deliberate movement of a limited contingent of military personnel and ground troops directly to the border area.
All of this is used precisely in the context of informational special operations and provocations, very dangerous elements that can trigger irreversible processes.
Therefore, Ukraine is monitoring its neighbor and assessing the risks.
They are watching what is happening, and of course intelligence units are actively monitoring deep inside the territory of Belarus. Given that there are now indications that Russia is putting increased pressure on Belarus to get it more deeply involved in the war waged against our country.
After all, Belarus is already an important element of the Russian military machine. For example, in the same Oreshnik drone that the Kremlin used to attack garages in Bila Tserkva, components of Belarusian manufacture were found.
Starting with microelectronic components, which, for instance, were found in the debris of the Oreshnik. and this made it possible to identify the enterprise responsible. It is specifically this Minsk-based enterprise Integral.
Belarus supplies high-tech components and microchips for Russian ballistic missiles. According to the Belarusian opposition group of former law enforcement officers and military personnel, BYPOL, more than 500 industrial enterprises in the country serve as a kind of typical workshop for the Russian army. And not only defense industry facilities are involved in this chain, but also, for example, seemingly peaceful factories like the wheel tractor plant in Minsk.
All Russian surface-to-air missile systems, all Russian operational tactical missile systems, all Russian intercontinental missiles, all of them are mounted on MZKT chassis.
A remarkably extensive and diverse array of tasks is also being comprehensively addressed in several other areas, such as, for example, the development of heavy armored combat vehicles, as well as the critical aviation component, and that is to say, advanced guidance systems, sophisticated integrated onboard electronic systems used in modern Russian tactical aviation, and directly the various specialized repair plants that are directly and officially connected to long-term contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense.
And Belarusian oil refineries are actively pumping fuel to Russia, which is also used to meet the needs of the army. So the second slap to Lukashenko came from the Hungarian, the one named Robert Brody. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces has sent a written warning to the Belarusians that 500 of their facilities are under surveillance.
Maybe they have identified 500 targets. Thank you that we have 500 targets for them. We have one target, a very serious one, with precise coordinates, and it's not far from Belarus at all.
Which one exactly, the Belarusian dictator did not explain. This often happens when you need to look menacing, but really don't want to find out what the consequences of your threats would be in practice.
I think if Lukashenko does something like that, it will be the end of Lukashenko as we know him. Because, of course, he can't compete with the Ukrainian army here.
After all, the Belarusian army itself is not ready to fight the Ukrainian armed forces, neither morally nor physically. The regular armed forces of Belarus consist of about 48,000 soldiers without real combat experience or motivation to fight.
In 2022, it was clear that Belarusians would not go to war, and now even more so. However, through various means, narratives and propaganda, it is possible to try to entice or force people to take part in the war.
Nevertheless, for the Kremlin, Belarus is valuable not as an ally on the battlefield, but as a staging ground, a training range, and a military machine.
Belarus is a production base, a huge production base, and moreover, this production base has one advantage that Russian territories do not have, because Ukraine does not strike Belarusian territory.
At least for now. Yevgenia Tereshchenko, We Are Ukraine, United News Marathon.